Hi, good morning, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your second day at AppSphere. I'm Abel Gonzalez with the product marketing team, and I'm very happy to have Aaron and Steph here from Accenture sharing with us how they use AppDynamics to drive performance in all of their applications. And I'm sure Accenture, such a big organization, they get a lot of pressure to be high performing. So thank you very much for presenting. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end.
All right, thanks for joining, everybody. As Abel mentioned, we are from Accenture. We focus on the internal side of what we call our internal business there. Basically, we run the applications that we use to run the business. So our customer is our employees. If you've ever worked with Accenture, you know how our employees are, and it can be a little demanding to have to work with those guys all the time. My name is Aaron Rakikis.
And I'm Stefania Puicha.
So we're going to really focus today on how we're able to deploy across hundreds of applications that support hundreds of thousands of users, and how have we driven the adoption across hundreds of employees to actually use the system on a regular basis. So we've got a couple of our boilerplate slides on who Accenture is. We have just under 400,000 employees, offices in 200 cities across 55 countries, 4,000 clients in over 100 countries, and last year's revenue topped out a little over $32 billion. And just a few quick facts about our internal IT. I'm not going to drain the slide, but you can imagine some of the challenges we face when we look at supporting hundreds of thousands of employees. We do have roughly 10,000 servers that we use for the internal enterprise. About 60% of those are up in the cloud today, and that continues to grow. We also have just under 700 applications that we use to support the business. And when I say 700 applications, it depends a little bit on how you count it. Last time I counted it was 2,000, but they told me it's only 700. Feels like more. And of those 700 apps we support, about 200 of those are considered high-performing applications, or high-priority applications. These are the ones that are the mission-critical ones, the time and expense applications, the collaboration and communication apps. Our homepage, as you can imagine, is a high-priority one. And we're estimating that this year we'll have about 150 new applications come on board. And that's because, as you can imagine, you've got to go through and replace your applications every few years, right? Just like everybody else, we're going to go through and we're going to replace some of these. We're going to have new apps coming on board, but it's a number that are going to be brand new development. And this is a mixture of custom development, SaaS offerings, PaaS offerings, vendor offerings. So we're monitoring the whole landscape there. Currently within AppDynamics, we do have about 160 applications that are being monitored. And that's a little over 330 environments. So we monitor production separately from staging. We look at those as separate environments. When we first started with AppDynamics 4 years ago, this was kind of a brand new concept. They kept telling us, no, put everything together into one big umbrella. And we fought with them, and we went our own way. But I think AppDynamics has been following along now. And then you can see we have about 1,300 servers monitored, 2,600 tiers, a little over 8,000 nodes in our system. I'm going to turn it over to Steph here. Steph's going to give an overview of really what we're covering in this presentation. Predominantly, how do we go about deploying to thousands of servers, hundreds of application teams? What are the techniques we use in order to keep ourselves sane, and how do we do this with the minimum number of people?
Thanks, Aaron. So as Aaron mentioned, I just want to give a quick overview of what we plan to discuss today. So first, starting with performance management, right? We're trying to change the outlook of how application teams troubleshoot performance. So we're going to be moving from reactive to proactive monitoring, right? We're not going to be relying on email alerts. We're going to be leveraging, performance monitoring tools and AppDynamics specifically to see how our application health is. Next, we're going to discuss deployment automation. So hopefully, this will apply to both small and larger companies. This is a way to automate our deployments and streamline that onboarding process so that the onboarding timelines are significantly reduced and your operations team spend a lot less time with the onboarding process. Next is the customization. So as Aaron mentioned, we have 700 applications. Figuring out how to customize the dashboards and health rules for those is very timely. So figuring out how we can come up with that standard set of health rule alerts, and then also coming up with those custom ones for the app teams, we figured out the process for that. And then last, I'll hand it off to Aaron again, so he can discuss the adoption strategy and how we've driven usage within internal IT. So just in the past year, we have driven usage with over 1,000 unique users in the console. So that's a pretty big accomplishment for us. So next, going into performance management, we monitor an array of technologies. So we are primarily a .NET house, but we do monitor other technologies as well. So we do monitor Java. We recently introduced Node.js. Octopus Deploy, you also see on there. This is a third-party tool. Do any of you use Octopus Deploy? Okay, so very few are familiar. But this tool is actually an automation tool for your application deployments. It's a great way to manage your code and then deploy it across your environments. So we actually experienced some issues. So at Accenture, we always find ways to push tools to their limits. And we had an issue with deployments, so they would begin to fail at a certain point. So what we did was we started to monitor the concurrent deployment threshold and determine what that was. So we were able to detect the issue or detect us approaching an issue. So just before it occurred, we could actually halt some of those deployments and prevent the server and the service from going down. So it's all about knowing your data, knowing what to look at. There are some other technologies, There are some other technologies that we're looking at today. We're extending to MongoDB. We do monitor Elasticsearch today. Let me get back on the right slide here. MongoDB, Elasticsearch, and as new technologies come about, we always figure out ways, or working with our application architects to figure out ways that we can monitor those technologies, because without AppDynamics, we have less visibility to it. We do use other monitoring tools today, but we found that AppDynamics really does help highlight those issues sooner. So here's the service catalog from AppDynamics. This is just a portion of it. So what we primarily use today is the application performance management, referred to as APM, and then the browser real user monitoring, RUM, so we call that RUM. The others we noted as beta. Now, please note that these are generally available by AppDynamics today. We mark these as beta because we're currently testing these solutions. We work with the application teams to develop these use cases. So we're part of the performance engineering team within the internal IT. So we don't necessarily architect these applications, but we need to have an understanding of what application teams need, which is why it's important to partner with them. So database monitoring, we're just starting to explore again. Synthetics we've been using for some time. Today, the way we manage our test scripts is a little bit different. We actually use something that doesn't quite work with AppDynamics today, so we're figuring out ways that we can import those scripts to leverage synthetics more, and again, work with the app teams to define those use cases. And then lastly, we're exploring server monitoring. So we discussed earlier, I'm going to be highlighting the changing the approach. So some key items, we're no longer waiting for the end user to report an issue. Now, this isn't true for every application that's onboarded. With over 600 applications, it's very challenging to have all of them be on top of their app. So we can't do the work for them in AppDynamics. But what we're pushing for is to have them identify the issues early on. And a part of that is making sure they have the right health rules in place, making sure that they're monitoring their dashboard regularly. So these are the different methods that we're pushing across to these teams. Next is the automation. So I touched on this earlier. We've automated the way we deploy our agents today, and this has significantly decreased onboarding times. Later in the presentation, I'll go in more detail about what tool we're using today and how you can do that. Next is what is relevant. So, looking at the response time for the overall application isn't going to give you as much data as you might need. So today, or I guess in the past, we've previously used Performance Monitor. And this gives you some insight to how the application's performing, but this doesn't help you drill down into where the issue is occurring. So with AppDynamics, we're able to look at the response time by business transaction. This really helps us hone down into which areas of the code we need to improve. Next is waiting for the email alert. So we want to make sure we're more interactive. We're not just sitting at our desks waiting for the next email or ping from a customer. We want to make sure that we're on top of it. So we do ask application teams to visit the controller on a daily basis. We actually give them a checklist of things to review. So even though the AppDynamics UI is very friendly, we want to make sure that application teams have no excuse and they're aware of what they should be checking in the controller on a daily basis. The next one here is flexibility. So we talked a little bit about waiting for email alerts. After a code deployment, we don't want to have to stand by necessarily and wait for an issue to occur. You can be on the go. So one thing I liked about this was we had a July 4th deployment this year, and I was helping out the application team. I said I'd monitor it. It's a holiday here in the US, so I didn't want to have to wait behind and miss the fireworks in Chicago. So I watched the performance on the mobile app, which was a nice feature. Luckily, everything went smoothly, so I didn't have to run and get my laptop, but it's nice to have that flexibility. The next one is relevance. So in the past, a lot of focus was put on CPU, memory, disk metrics. Today, we can actually look at the application health as a whole. So we can continue to see those hardware metrics, but now we're assessing key performance indicators. We're looking at business transaction response time, the error rate. We can look at the timings, which times of the day do these errors frequently occur. And along with relevance, we've been pushing what that global picture looks like. So we're no longer focusing on supporting an application. We're looking at supporting our global end users. So using EUM, we've been able to see which geographies, which browsers might be struggling with performance. That really gives us a chance to see which areas we need to focus on to make sure all of our end users are having the same great experience. And then last is that collaborative look. So before AppDynamics, it was a bit of a challenge. We're all diving in different ways to see what the issue might be. Now everyone from developers to managers can take a look in AppDynamics and get the level of detail that they need to see where the issue is occurring, if the application's healthy, and collectively we can look together at the issue. So now I'm going to go into the deployment automation. This onboarding process here, I'll say, has helped reduce our onboarding times significantly. So with the number of applications that we support internally, it's very timely to manage those requests. So we decided to find a way to streamline that process. First, it's starting with a business case. So we don't have an unlimited number of licenses, so we need to make sure we give it out to those application teams that matter. Our high priority application teams are required by leadership to have these tools in place. This includes our time reporting tool, our Accenture.com site, those apps that are critical to the business. And then our lower priority application teams, we really do read those business cases in detail to make sure that we're giving it to app teams that will use the tool fully. So it's not just about monitoring CPU. I love when those requests come through. We need to monitor CPU, and I ask them to go take a look at SCOM. We want to make sure that teams are looking at the full picture, looking at business transactions, response time, error rate, things like that. So a part of this onboarding process, we ask teams to submit a questionnaire. So we developed a questionnaire sheet that gives application teams an opportunity to provide all of their application details, who their primary contacts are, their server list, what data center it's located in, what technologies are they looking to monitor, and then depending on the technology they select, it gives them a chance to fill out the appropriate fields. So for example, Elasticsearch, we need some additional details like what port, possibly the user and password. So those types of details are provided within the questionnaire. This really reduces the amount of back and forth emails with the application team. We've moved from 4 weeks down to 1 week onboarding timeline. We could do it within an hour of that request, but we actually decided to just have 2 windows during the week to perform those onboarding times, just to reduce the stress on our team and to have a more regular schedule. And then last, in those in those questionnaires, we ask teams to provide their customization requests. So this includes everything from special health rules, performance metrics that they would like to see. All of this is defined within the questionnaire. Next, we're moving into the install. One thing that we can't stress enough is deploying to pre-production first. No matter how badly a team needs it, we have to deploy to pre-production. We ask them to smoke test it. This makes sure that the application and AppDynamics play nicely, and we don't see any issues for our end users, because that's who we care most about. Once they've smoke test, we move into production. If they do experience issues in production, we can look back and say, well, we deployed to your non-production environment first, and you can't come to us and say, well, hey, it's your fault that you installed AppDynamics. Well, no, look at your non-production. If you smoke test fully, you didn't discover any issues, there's not much that we could have done at that point to prevent it. So we take action afterwards, and very few cases have we seen where there's been an instrumentation issue with the AppDynamics agent. But then as those cases come, AppDynamics has always been supportive. With the next step is the optimization. So we have those customization details provided to us. We set up health rules and dashboards, and then we train the application team. So we want to make sure that they understand how to use the tool to the best advantage. And then the last step of the process, or I shouldn't say the last step of the process, but a repeated process is the upgrade. So we have a semi-annual upgrade scheduled. This makes sure that we stay on almost the latest agent version, and we allow teams to select those upgrade windows so we don't impact their deployment timelines. And again, with these upgrades, we use our automated deployment tool, which we'll touch on next, and this significantly reduces that upgrade time for us. All right, so looking at the automated deployment benefits. Today we use Antigua. So it's a centralized automated deployment tool. This is a way to virtualize the agent. So this doesn't touch your OS DLLs, your registries, your services. You don't have to worry about impacting the server itself. Once this is virtualized, you can actually define those configuration parameters. Everything from the application name to the controller host name, password. So it no longer becomes a repetitive process when you're installing this for the application teams. You can now just focus on any of those special customization requests. So we've decreased the onboarding timeline from 3 weeks to 1 week. Like I said, we could reduce this to a day if we did onboardings every day. Next is, this is a central agent management console. So we have access to all of the internal IT servers across the globe. This is one advantage to using Antigua and why we chose the tool. So today, or I should say in the past, when we would manage deployments, these manual installs would require server access, and that was very timely. It would require a request for each server. You'd hope that all of the servers were put in the request. You wait for it, you do the manual install. But now we can get access to any server that's out there and quickly do a deployment within minutes. So within our upgrade season, we completed 98% of the upgrades with no downtime. This was a huge success for us. The other 2% just simply couldn't be scheduled in that 4-week window. But being able to do these upgrades without any issues, without having to get on each server and manual upgrade, saved us a lot of time. And then last, I believe I touched on this earlier, is we reduce the amount of chance for user error. So having that configuration already set up in the Antigua controller allowed us to make sure that we have that same setting each time, the password's username is the same, and we don't have to worry about any errors there. I'm going to next touch on the customization. So we talked a little bit earlier about how we have the application team provide us with the health rules and dashboards that they would like to see. We do sit down with them. We want to identify those key performance indicators and make sure that we're monitoring them for the users, and not only monitoring them, but setting up the email alerts that they need, highlighting them in the dashboard, and making sure it's visible to everyone. We also have the application teams identify the top transactions. So not every team has this today, but those that do have this typically provide this from their application performance testing phase. Maybe they have a test script that highlighted the most important transactions, or they're more familiar with their application, they'll know which pages their end users are hitting most often. So we'll configure these as match rules in the next step. We'll configure the dashboards, match rules. After we've let things sit in the controller for a week, we'll revisit again. Typically, the match rules will configure at least one more time because sometimes some new transactions might come in. And then lastly is the data collector setup. So we might focus on some more particular details. For example, the Octopus deployments, we might collect certain metadata, for example, the deployment number or which application team was deploying. So if there is an issue, we were actually able to go back and identify which application team deployed a troublesome deployment. And then the health rules and dashboards, so looking at those top tiers and transactions we configured, we make sure to highlight that in an appropriate way. We do have standard dashboards today that we deploy to most application teams. For those higher priority application teams and those application teams that need it, we will set up some special custom dashboards for them. So as we streamline the onboarding process to save time, we're starting to see a higher demand for AppDynamics. It's a mixture of things. It's word of mouth, application teams are seeing the benefits. We're also pushing the tool, so if there's an outage, we might decide to quickly get AppDynamics in there to see what the issue is. And really, leadership is starting to push this as well to our application teams. Aaron's going to discuss our performance management approach and how it has shifted over the years after we've introduced AppDynamics.
All right. Thanks, Steph. All right. Anybody else using Antigua, by the way? Chef? Anybody doing with Chef? A couple of folks with Chef? Okay. All right. So just a little bit of history of our performance engineering group. We are the internal performance engineering group. What we focus on are the apps that run Accenture. My team does not go in and actually make sure that these apps are running properly. What we do is when they're having problems, we can go in there and we can help them troubleshoot. So, these are the SWAT guys that come in, the highly skilled guys. They can go in there and they can troubleshoot database problems and they can troubleshoot application problems. Back in 2010, 2012, before we had AppDynamics, the bulk of the problems we saw were database problems. Add an index and it fixes everything. And of course, we started teaching teams that, and they started adding their own indexes, and they quit calling us so often. We did have tools in place that we were using for monitoring systems. Primarily, applications were concerned about the finite metrics, CPU, disk, memory. They'd see, oh, my CPU is higher than it should be. I have a problem. Let's go in and investigate, and let's call up performance engineering to see if they can help out. We had a few tools that were doing performance management and doing tracking of the internal code. The problem I had was I had a handful of folks that knew how to use those tools. I had a handful of applications they were deployed to. It wasn't widely accepted. It was I wouldn't say it was difficult to use, but we weren't really getting a lot of benefit out of it. So in about 2012, we started meeting with AppDynamics, and we said, let's see what else is out there. And we decided to bring them in. When we did that, the focus on it was really easy implementation. It's very easy to turn on and configure. I can throw it into an app, and it's up and running. The other thing we had is I could open it up to the application teams to view the data themselves. It's not that we couldn't do it before, it's that nobody understood the data. Now with AppDynamics, I can give it to a developer, and they know it right away. We really began our deployment by focusing on application teams that were having performance issues. These were our time and expense application, some of our portal applications or collaborative apps. These were the ones that were having the most problems. We started there. We started teaching the teams how to use the tools. They latched on. They started loving it. And once I sit down with them, I'd sit down with them and we'd go through a couple of troubleshooting, and they'd see us using the tools. And the light bulb would go off, and we'd do it again, and we'd do it a third time, and the fourth time, they're not calling me, or they're not calling me to help them troubleshoot. They're calling me because they said, hey, we have a problem. We've looked in AppDynamics. This is what we see. Do you think it's right? Completely different conversation. Rather than having a handful of people that are fighting fires here and there, what I have is I've enabled the developers and the architects to go out and solve the problems themselves. What we found with this is as we had those individuals that started learning the tool and loving the tool, they became advocates for AppDynamics. So the next thing I know is I've got another team requesting it, another team that requests it. And when these individuals roll from one team to another, they go to that next application and now they want to use it there as well. And their old team's still using it. So it was a lot of just organic growth. People saw it, they loved it, and they start talking to each other. This was the bottom-up approach that we have. If you don't have the senior leadership pushing it down, you can do this bottom-up with just the developers talking to each other, and they recognize the benefit. You don't have to have the senior leaders pushing apps to use it. All right, today we're in a situation where really the application teams themselves own the performance issues. My team really gets called when it's a new application that's just using it for the first time or it's a little bit over their heads. We don't get called anymore because they need to add an index to a database. Now we're getting called because they're having contention across an asynchronous process, or they have a parallel process that's having issues, or there's some weird thing going on with the database that they just can't figure out. But we're being called to solve the tough problems, not the easy problems anymore, because that's being taken care of by the lower tier support. On our production team, on our applications that we do have, it is now being mandated by senior leadership, and that was new as of last year. And we have, well, I say it's mandated. I do have 3 applications that are high priority applications that are not using it, and the reason is it just does not make sense for those apps. My Office 365, I'm not going to install AppDynamics on there. Microsoft's not going to like that. When we do the training today, we do individualized training with the application teams. After it's installed, we sit down with them and we look at their particular application. Previously what we do is we do these grandiose trainings with, hey everybody, we have this offering, come and take a look at it. That's nice, and you train 20 people and 2 of them would go and use it. Now when I sit down with a room and I have 5 people from an application in a room, they're watching what you're doing with this tool and the light bulb's going off, and I didn't know the app worked like that, right? This is the same story you've heard from every other conversation here. But it's just getting it out there in front of the application teams and getting it in front of the developers that have really made a difference. Our operations team is also plugged into AppDynamics. It's still a little in the new area for our operations guys and the knocks that we have out there. Primarily right now they're focused on, hey, an alert came in from AppDynamics, I need to forward it onto the app team. So we're working on that one, but we'll get there. And then we are seeing that the usage continues over time. And to just, we alluded to this earlier. Here's our unique users by day. And over the last 2 years, you can see the growth that's been there. We average around 50 unique users every day. Our fiscal year that ended just a few months ago, ended in the end of August, we had over 1,000 unique users over the previous 12 months. We've had AppDynamics in 4 years, and after 4 years, I still have 1,000 people in there every year looking at the tool. In a given week, we typically see about 150 to 200 users in AppDynamics, and on average, they're logging in twice a day to go ahead and take a look at their system. It's not every application team that's using it, but it's most of them. All right. Here's the picture, everyone with their cell phone. This is the picture you want right here. What's our success story on the adoption that we've done? Use AppDynamics to troubleshoot problems in production. Once I sit down with folks and I show them how to troubleshoot, I show it to them once, twice, 3 times, and the 4th time they're doing it themselves. So, let them in the tool. Make sure you test deployments in your non-production environment first. Steph alluded this to me already. We've been with them 4 years. 4 years ago, .NET was relatively new to AppDynamics. We had a number of deployments where we put it in on the application and it brought down the app. And even today, in the last year, I think we've had 3 applications that have gone down because of installing AppDynamics that we've had to go back and have patches put in place. We actually had, during a major upgrade process, we were going through and we were updating all of our apps. 2 of them had issues. 2 of 160 had issues, and we stopped deployments until we could get the patch in place for those 2 because I was worried about who else it was going to be. Test it first. The last thing I need is an MD calling me saying, telling me you brought down production. If I can at least say, hey, we tested it in non-production first, the application owner signed off on it, hey, I'm good. I didn't lose my job. But if I'm out there and, yeah, we threw it in production and it brought down production and we didn't bother testing it, that's not a conversation you want to have with an EMD. Just wait till the next time pay raises come up, Who gets a license? We have 10,000 servers out there. I don't know what deals you guys are getting, but AppDynamics does cost some money. I'm not going to install it on every single environment. We prioritize production and one non-production environment, usually our performance test environment, so we can use it during performance testing. And we prioritize the high-performing and the high-priority applications. We're looking at the low-priority apps out there. We allow them to use it. We allow them to use it for troubleshooting because there's certainly value. But the other thing I'm doing with those low-priority applications is I'm watching how much they're using AppDynamics. You haven't logged in 6 weeks. Nobody's looking at your data anymore. Why am I burning a license for you guys? I can give it to somebody else, somebody who cares and somebody who's going to get some value out of it. So let me focus on the guys that are actually using it and give it to them. And it's not uncommon that we'll drop it in there for a low-priority app. They use it 3 times, they get through their issue. And these low-priority apps, these are the apps that have 15 users because they're running a report once a month. I don't want to burn a license on them. It's money that I can spend elsewhere. And if they don't come back for 6 weeks, they can come back to me in 3 months and they can ask me for a new license and we'll deploy it again. Focus adoption on those key individuals that understand why AppDynamics is important. You get those champions out there. Focus on those guys. Show those guys the love. We wanted to bring a few of them to AppSphere with us. It didn't quite work out this year, but let them see the goodness that's in there and let them start asking the questions. The best news is I got an email a couple of weeks ago and someone said, hey, I see AppDynamics has synthetics. Can we use it? Well, we're piloting it now. They weren't on the pilot program, but now I've got folks reaching out to me saying, hey, we want to try this too. Grant controller access to all of our users. We've set up read-only access to all of our internal IT folks. I have over 4,000 people with access to the tool. I'm not going to hide anybody's data. Once you have access to the tool, I don't care if you're on App A, App B, or App C, you can see all of the data out there. Now, we do set it up for read-only access. You can't go through and change anybody else's data. You can't reconfigure anything. But the other thing we have with all these applications is there's a lot of interdependency. So if I'm having, give you an example, if I look at our portal page, it wants to put my little picture in the corner, and that's served by another application. If that's being slow, I want that user to be able to go and say, well, what's going on with that service? Why are they running slow, and are they seeing problems? I don't want them troubleshooting, but at least they know that something else is going on with that service. And then ultimately, the last thing we've done is application teams themselves are responsible for requesting AppDynamics. Now, we've said that we've mandated this for all of our high-priority applications. They still have to request it. And the reason we do this is quite simple. If I give this to you for free and I'm just, oh yeah, it's out there and you can use it, are you going to use it? No. I mean, it's out there. Great, that's nice. But if you have to request it, well, now you've got some skin in the game. I've at least taken the time to put in a request. We used to actually charge back application teams for it. That's changed this year. But they used to have to pay a little bit of money. It was, I think, about 2 hours worth of work for us to actually do the install, and they would have to foot the bill for it. So if you're going to request it, there's some incentive for you to actually use it once you get the data. All right. And then where do we go from here? So here's what we're looking at next. Steph's already alluded to consistent health rules and dashboards across all of the teams, as well as email alerting. So we're working with our enablement services to kind of set this up, and Richard here in the front row is loving us because I think we've got like 2 months worth of business for you alone. But how do we go through and do we just standardize across 160 apps? Because I do not want to set up dashboards individually. One of the new features we love about AppDynamics is the new RBAC security model. So we're looking to start implementing that to go ahead and allow application teams to handle their own configuration. It's a little bit dangerous. They're going to be calling us because they have issues, but we'll give it a shot. We want to start doing self-service requests for AppDynamics. Right now, they do request it from us. And Steph alluded to, we have a process that we go through. We've automated this through Antigua as much as we can, but today somebody still has to go in and click the button. We want to set up the situation where the application team themselves can go in and click the button. We'll still have some rules in place around this. We're going to make you deploy it to non-production first. If you choose not to test it, hey, that's your problem, but I made you deploy it there first. And we want to let them deploy it whenever they want. So rather than us telling you this is when your window's going to be, you can do it when you'd like to. I think it's going to speed things up a lot, and it's going to free up our team a lot. One of the problems I foresee with this is everybody's going to want it. They're going to go and request it all the time. So we're going to start to monitor even more aggressively to make sure that the application teams that aren't using it, let's yank their license and give it to somebody else. So we'll probably allow you to onboard, and after 6 weeks, I'm going to knock you off because you haven't used it in 6 weeks. Operations team enablement. So this is going to be one of the big areas I think we have next year, is really integrating with our NOC, and we actually call it a service operations hub. And these are the guys that go in and they're the tier 0, tier 1 support. They're just watching the dashboards, watching for the flashing red light to appear. Really make sure that we can get integrated with their dashboards the right way. Right now we have alerts and a red light that goes off, and that's it. What more can we give them? Can we give them more context around the issues? So we are talking to Big Panda, Moog, a few other providers out there to see if we can start to aggregate this data together and be a little bit smarter about the alerts. And then the other thing we're curious to see if we can do this or not is what I'd call post-outage detection. How many application outages do we have that nobody's ever aware of because an alarm never sounded? If I have an outage that lasts 4 minutes, my CPU alarm never tripped because my CPU gets checked every 10 minutes, or it wasn't a long enough duration to trip it, or whatever, my request is on a 30-minute buffer, whatever it is. And teams are never aware of it, nobody bothers calling in. Can we use AppDynamics to start to detect that apps are having problems that they're not even aware of because alarms aren't going off? The other thing about that is, do we need to start to tune our alarms once we start to analyze the data? Couple of leaderships we're looking at. So we want to start reporting who's using AppDynamics. And to that last point, can we correlate which application teams are using AppDynamics with those application teams that are having the most issues? And we're still working on this. There's some features coming out in 4.2 that are going to really make this easier for us, or some features that we're trying to leverage in 4.2 that are going to make this easier for us to do. But what we're looking for is, if you're having a lot of problems, is it because you're using AppDynamics and you're finding those problems before anybody else does, and you're fixing them before it's recognized by the end user? Or are you completely oblivious to anything's going on and you're not even in the tool? But now I can start to get the leadership involved with that, and I can start to get my MDs competing with each other for who's got the best applications out there. And then we're also looking at scorecarding the top applications that are out there. So when can I do a heat map that shows which apps are the slowest performing? And again, I can go back to the MDs and I can align it by MD, and I can start to have them look at each other as my apps are doing better than your apps, and I need to start focusing in these particular areas. And this has really been coming about because in the last year we have had a top-down focus on AppDynamics. And because of that focus, we are seeing an explosion in the usage of the tool. We're seeing a very large number of apps that are currently using it. So. And then just performance at a glance. What else can we do on just to help out folks? And one thing we're looking at is to help out our network team is, can we use end-user monitoring to start to detect issues in particular geographies? They have their own networking tools, but is it going to work in every situation? Or are there things that they just can't detect or they don't see, or that we can find that they don't? If I have 20 applications that are all having a problem in the same data center, might be a data center issue, might be a network issue, probably not an individual application issue that's affecting 20 different apps. So what kind of stuff can we do there? And finally, we've been working on a Skype bot to just kind of enable users to quickly and easily see their data. We do use Skype for Business, and to have a bot out there that I can just type in, hey, how's the performance of my app doing, to be able to demo, show that.
ACAT's been a little busy lately. Let's see how they're doing.
Retrieving performance information. Over the last 15 minutes, ACAT has averaged 332 requests per minute. Over the last 15 minutes, ACAT has averaged 0.26 seconds per response.
Well, that's not too bad. I wonder if performance achievement is having any problems.
Retrieving health rule violations. 7 health rule violations were identified. Name, business transaction error rate is much higher
Oh
than
boy,
percentage
I
stats.
better call Dan and find out what's going on.
All right. That concludes. Any questions? Go ahead.
Be right there.
Do you offer SLAs for the onboarding process to your customers?
Do you
Yes.
want to take that one? Good.
Yeah, so we do have SLAs today. Within 3 to 5 days, we'll onboard the applications. Setting these expectations is important because sometimes application teams come to us and say, well, we need this now. Why can't you drop everything that you're doing? So that just sets the standard for everyone. So that's helped us immensely.
And do you spread your application across different controllers? And if so, what is your measurement when one controller reach the end and you go to the next?
Yeah, so we have two separate controllers. We have one for all of our non-production servers, whether that be APT, staging, test, and then we have a second controller for production. So we do treat them a little bit differently. In our non-production, we typically push for the APT servers to be onboarded. That's where we're pushing application teams to do load testing. We can really get the most insight to how healthy their application is. And then in production, we typically will ask application teams to, set up those defined health rules, dashboards, so we get even more granular with how we customize it in the controller. I'll also note that the upgrade of our controller is also a little bit different. So with non-production, we'll upgrade and try to stay close to the latest. We'll let it bake in there for a few weeks. If we're okay with what we see, then we will push it to production as well.
Thank you. If you allow a final question. In the chargeback model, what consider you have a full chargeback of resources, license, hardware, or everything, or?
So licenses are paid for essentially by just our central IT. Ultimately, it's one guy in charge of the budget for all of these applications, so he's fine with just paying for that. In our chargeback model, what we were doing, previously is we would charge back for time spent, basically just time on the project itself. Most apps would take about 2 to 8 hours to onboard, depending on the size. The small ones would be about 2 hours. The large ones would be more like 8. If we had to do any training or any customization, we would charge them for that. This isn't a large amount of money. It's just a little bit so that they can feel a little bit of pain, and it's not one of these, hey, let me just bother them with a budget request.
Yeah, and upgrades, we don't charge application teams as well. That just comes through from our operations budget. Mm-hmm.
Two quick questions. First off, what method do you use to chart your unique users and per month and over the year?
So the way we've been historically doing it is for the last few years, we've had a report coming out from the controller on a daily basis that's emailed out that shows me the number of users that have logged in over the last 24 hours. What we do is we parse through all of those logs to extract, this is the username, this is the day they logged in, and then we just throw an Excel into it in there. With 4.2, what's been introduced is you can now do that through the REST API. So we'll be transitioning over to the REST API. And the other thing that's been introduced is previously I could tell somebody's logged in. I didn't know which application they were actively looking at. So I kind of correlated it, and I could say, well, this user is associated with this application because they charged their charge number. I don't know if that's exactly right, so we kind of loosely did some stuff like that. Going forward with 4.2, there's been some introduction where I can actually see that they're actively looking at this particular application by viewing the dashboard on it.
And then my second question is, it sounds like I've heard you say that your team handles all the configuration of business transactions and dashboards. As you look to open this up to your user base, have you come across any automation tools to interact with those role-based access controls? Because our experience has been from the UI, it's pretty challenging to use.
Yeah, so on the business transaction side, 85% of our apps, I'm going to say 85% of our apps are straight out of the box for business transaction configuration, health rule configuration. The ones that are customized, we do run it through the UI. Going forward in the future, what we are doing is we're going to be leveraging the REST API to go ahead and say, here's a standard dashboard, what the standard dashboard looks like. And now I can go through and I can do a quick find replace on some JSON that says now point to this application, upload it back in there, and now I have a custom dashboard. Or I have a standard dashboard that's now built for a particular application team. We are talking about probably expanding that a little bit more with a few checkboxes of what my vision is. I'd love to be able to say, hey, we have Elasticsearch, and I'm going to check the box for Elasticsearch. Or we have MongoDB, and I check the box for MongoDB, and all of a sudden, here's the dashboard for this application that's already set up and configured with their specific information.
I want to make sure we understood your question, though. Was your question on automation of role-based access? We have not worked on that yet. So, yeah, we have yet to work through those challenges.
Hi there. With regards to your 1 week onboarding, how have you find the experience with the awareness that these teams might have about what a business transaction is, what health rules are? Because we run into a lot of the teams that are really only caring about CPU because that's what they've known traditionally, right? So we typically have to train them up front about how AppDynamics looks at performance. So I'm just curious, do you have to do some of that initially? Have you done anything sort of upfront so that they come to the table with some awareness?
Absolutely. So after onboarding, we do provide a demo to the application team. So once they're in production, we'll do a walkthrough so they can actually see their data and what's relevant to them. We've also created training videos so we can hand that off to the application team members who weren't able to attend. And then we have plenty of wiki documentation that we point them to that we've created internally. So that really points them to how to understand the terminology, what they should be looking at, and a lot of FAQ. So.
I have two questions. One is you mentioned you're planning doing the self-service for the agent deployment. Do you see any challenges, or how are you dealing with those two selfish users?
So there is, so within Antigua, there is some control access. So only our team actually has permission to deploy the agents. So that prevents anyone from deploying an agent that we haven't given them permission to deploy. Now, the issue comes with cloning servers because this copies over the agent all the configuration, and right now we do not have a way of stopping a team. So with a part of our tracking tools that we're creating to see what agents are monitored today, we're going to try to figure out a way to see that delta, so to see which servers were onboarded without our permission, and then revoke those agents.
And as far as the self-service goes, it is a challenge. What we're looking at initially is because we're using Antigua, and the reason we use Antigua, and one of the things I love about it, we use it primarily because it has access to all of our servers, and not everybody uses Octopus for deployments. A few of them that do are using Octopus to deploy, or a handful of teams are using Octopus to deploy AppDynamics. Antigua allows me to retain control over the agent. So if I decide that I don't want you to have it anymore, I have the authority to go in there and remove it from your system, but I don't necessarily need access to your server. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to be watching that closely, and if we do start to see a team that goes nuts with requesting it for a bunch, I still have the ability to go in there and knock them off. I think you guys have seen the licensing model that's come out recently. We're starting to talk about that as to if we start to enable self-service, do we start to carve up our licenses by application, and they need to come back to us for ask to more? We're still figuring that out, but yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think that having that centralized configuration management, you have an advantage of not only allowing the good guys to install the agent, but controlling the bad guys as well.
Yeah.
The second question was about that contest you have or plan to have about the team has a best dashboard, best business transactions. Can you share the experience a little bit more? Because we do have the same. I just want to maybe capture some gooder practices from you.
Yeah, let's.
I think we lost our clicker. Let me just. It's okay.
Or 1 second.
We'll answer that, and we have one more question, and then we're out of time.
Yeah, so what we're looking at that perspective is we're really looking at, for the applications themselves, which are the ones that have we look at the top business transactions, which are the busiest business transactions out there, and then let's go through and let's mark those through. We're probably going to define thresholds for ourselves, and this is the one I love. Here's my applications by row, and then I have a report that we generate that shows application requests, application response time, and this is data for the last 12 weeks that's being presented here, all these spark lines over the last 12 weeks. And I can start to color code the information to show who is living up to our standards, and I can gradually bring those standards down. Initially we'll probably do under a second for a business transaction is green, over 3 seconds is red. After we've got this out there for a year, that's going to drop to half a second and 2 seconds. We can start to make this a little bit harder. But the other thing we'll start to do is we'll start to group this together by managing directors, so the managing directors can see which of their apps are the worst ones out there.
You mentioned before that you had the AppDynamics for 4 years.
Yes.
All right. So now when you first purchased your license, this is a license issue, how often did you have to go for the next tier for the period you had on your transition? What was your license upgrade as you moved ahead and as you're looking towards the future?
So when we first purchased, we purchased for a 3-year period of time. And this was, it's going to be up to your sales rep on how you'd purchase this. we purchased our licenses for 3 years. As we've exhausted our licenses, we go back in and, hey, we need to buy a few more, we need to buy a few more. After 3 years, a year ago, we renewed. And that's why we're here today, because we renewed our licenses with AppDynamics. And we just go back when we need to, and if we need to purchase more, we purchase more. And our procurement side handles the true-up and all that good stuff.
All right, so now, as you're moving ahead with the apps that you have, I'm excited about the business IQ that they're promoting. So if you're looking at, you're a customer at this time, you don't have business IQ and at this time. So what your thoughts are as you move ahead and incorporate that into your current license?
If we do, we'll purchase additional licenses for it. So earlier this year, we've deployed RUM. Earlier this year, we had a situation where we ran out of RUM licenses. We're looking at the database monitoring, for example. If we pursue database monitoring, we'll do the same thing, where we'll have to go and buy the database licenses at that time.
Also, if in the dashboards that you're building for your applications, you have I guess a standard template you may be using to get the bulk of your applications in place with their respective dashboards?
Yes.
So now what do you do with your critical apps, which obviously are going to need a little more in that dashboard setting? Do you sit down and take these requirements from the survey that you may have put in place?
Yeah, we'll go through. Here's like one of the custom dashboards I built for a particular application team that they specifically wanted to look at end user monitoring for 6 different geographies. So in a case where they need something custom, we go in and we build it in the tool. We do it custom. Usually what we do is we've got enough experience with the REST API and with programming.NET. We usually build them externally as a JSON and then import them in and tweak it that way. Trying to build something like this by hand, it gets tedious. So yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
everything.
Thanks.